My name is Clara Thompson, and I'm a mother, a wife. Or at least I used to be. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, married young, had a beautiful son, and built what I believed was the perfect life. Or so I thought. It all started 25 years ago when I married Mark Thompson. He was charming, ambitious, and had a smile that made everyone melt. We met in college, and it was one of those whirlwind romances. Intense, fast, all-consuming. I thought he was my soulmate, the man I'd grow old with. We built our life together, bought a home, and raised our son, Ethan. Ethan was the light of my life. The moment he was born, something inside me changed. I wanted to be the best mother, the rock of the family. Mark, on the other hand, was always chasing something bigger. Career moves, networking events, late-night meetings. At first, I thought it was normal. Who doesn't want to provide a better future for their family? But as the years went by, I started to feel him drift away. It wasn't one big moment. It was hundreds of little ones. He missed Ethan's school plays. He forgot anniversaries. When I confronted him, he'd smile and say, "You know how things are right now." I convinced myself it was just a phase. Marriage, after all, wasn't supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be commitment, patience, understanding. We were living in a comfortable bubble, but beneath the surface, I felt something was off. Sometimes he'd answer the phone in hushed tones, or leave the room abruptly. I would catch him staring blankly at nothing during dinner. I'd ask, "You okay?" He'd grin and say, "Just tired." Still I stayed. I stayed because love isn't always about fireworks and passion. It's about showing up for each other when life gets messy. I wanted to believe that. As Ethan grew up, our home became quieter. He went off to college, eager to explore the world, while Mark and I stayed behind. I thought this was the season when we'd finally reconnect, rediscover each other. But then the wedding invite came. It wasn't mine. It was Ethan's. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the embossed card. It read, "Ethan Thompson and Lauren Hayes, together with their families, invite you to their wedding celebration." I blinked. Together with their families. I flipped it over. On the back, the names were listed. Lauren's parents, Ethan's father Mark Thompson. Froze. No mention of me. Not even Ethan's mother. For a second my heart stopped. I must have read it 10 times before it finally sunk in. I wasn't invited. My stomach churned. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But mostly I wanted to disappear. That night, Mark came home later than usual. I placed the card on the table in front of him. He didn't even flinch. "I thought you'd heard," he mumbled. "Of course I've heard," I snapped. "I'm standing right here." He avoided my eyes. "It's complicated." Complicated. How do you exclude your wife from your son's wedding and call it complicated? I stared at him, searching for an explanation. He looked exhausted, worn out. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Clara, please. Not now." But it was already happening. Something had broken, something had spilled, and I could feel it seep through every wall in my life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding that invitation card like it was poison. I thought back to all the years of silence, all the ignored red flags, all the times I chose to look the other way. I thought of Ethan, who I raised to be honest, kind, and strong. How could he do this? How could Mark do this? The next morning I packed a small bag and left. I didn't tell him where I was going. I just drove aimlessly, letting the road swallow me. I sat in cafes, parks, and empty benches. I replayed everything over and over again until it carved new scars into my mind. But as the days passed, a cold clarity began to creep in. I wasn't going to cry and crawl back. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion in something so carefully planned without me. I was going to learn everything. I was going to see the truth for myself. And when I found it, I would decide how this story ends. That's where my real journey began. Not with heartbreak, but with resolve. I started asking questions, following leads, observing how Mark and Ethan behaved. And that's when the secrets started pouring out like a flood. After that day, I stopped pretending everything was fine. I became quiet, watchful, and, I'll admit, obsessive. I started by going through Mark's phone when he wasn't looking. It felt wrong, invasive. But I couldn't stop myself. The betrayal had already started without my knowledge. So why should I respect boundaries that no longer existed? At first, it was nothing. Old contacts, spam messages, random appointments. But then I found something that froze my blood. There it was. A thread of messages between Mark and a woman named Vanessa Reed. Not some harmless flirting. Explicit, intimate, and desperate. I miss you every second we're apart. I hate that I can't be with you. You're my world. After Ethan's wedding, we can finally figure this out. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I didn't need to read further. The worst part. Mark's name was still saved as Mark Thompson Home. So this wasn't some affair from years ago. It was current. Active. Live. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, the phone clutched like a weapon. When I confronted him that night, he didn't deny it. Instead, he sighed and said, "Clara, I never meant for this to happen. Never meant." I wanted to scream, to throw something at him, to make him feel the betrayal that clawed at me like fire. But I didn't. I sat silently, waiting for him to say more. But he just looked away. I feel alive with her. With you, it's all duty. With her, it's love. Duty. Years of marriage, the quiet sacrifices, raising Ethan, holding this family together. It was just duty. I wanted to shatter his face. But the discovery didn't stop there. I started digging deeper. I followed him discreetly, tracking where he went after work, how often he left town, and who he met. And then I found Vanessa. It wasn't hard. A few quick searches and I found her social media profiles. Pictures with him everywhere. Private vacations, dinner dates, stolen glances, selfies in hotel rooms. My stomach churned again. She was gorgeous, younger than me by at least 10 years, stylish, confident, and careless enough to flaunt everything online. But the real blow came when I found a video. One Mark had mistakenly uploaded. It wasn't fully explicit, but it was intimate enough to destroy him. The way he touched her, the whispered words, the passion. It tore through every fiber of my being. That same week, I ran into Ethan at a coffee shop. He smiled at me warmly, unaware of the storm in my chest. "Mom, it's so good to see you." I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap him. Instead, I forced a tight smile. "How have you been, honey?" I asked, my voice calm, too calm. He laughed. "Busy with wedding stuff. It's overwhelming, honestly." I watched his eyes. There was guilt, yes, but also defensiveness. "Oh, I saw the invitation," I said gently. He froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "I know. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Pressed softly. He looked away. I didn't say another word. But the message was clear. I wasn't blind anymore. The cracks went all the way to the top. That night I sat alone in the dark. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. Anger, humiliation, heartbreak, and fear. Mark wasn't just cheating on me. He had built a whole secret life while pretending to be the perfect husband and father. Ethan wasn't just excluding me from his wedding. He was complicit. He knew. I curled into myself and cried until I couldn't breathe. But after the tears, a strange calm took over. I whispered to myself, "You think you can erase me? You think you can walk away from everything we built?" I stared at the ceiling and made a silent vow. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I would fight. The next few days I collected everything. I downloaded every photo, saved every message, recorded dates, and documented every time he lied. It became an obsession, but one with purpose. I started planning. Where could I hit him hardest? What would break him not just publicly but inside? How could I turn the love they shared into the ruin it deserved to be? Then came the final piece of the puzzle. A friend from work, Samantha, who knew nothing about my personal life, casually mentioned that Vanessa and Mark were planning a trip abroad. 2 weeks long, right after Ethan's wedding. My heart raced. I knew exactly what I had to do. The night before Ethan's wedding, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, notes, timelines. I traced every lie of omission, every smile they used to cover it up. I picked up the invitation card again. This time I didn't cry. Smiled. It was time. After discovering the truth, I couldn't sleep. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with pounding thoughts and restless twisting under the sheets. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's smirking face, Vanessa's careless laughter, and Ethan's distracted eyes. My heart ached, yes, but it didn't weaken me. Something inside hardened. I stopped being the grieving wife and mother. I became something else. Something sharper. I kept replaying the moment I confronted him, the way he looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Duty, he'd said. As if all I ever wanted was to manage the household, serve him dinner, and quietly raise children while he sought love elsewhere. I wasn't going to disappear. I started each day with a cold shower and silence, and then when the world seemed normal, I plotted. The breakdown. On the third day after Ethan's wedding invitation had been delivered to my doorstep, I found myself sitting in the living room staring at the photographs from the past. Mark smiling at our anniversary dinner, holding Ethan's hand when he was a boy, laughing with me on our first road trip. Memories stabbed like daggers. But I didn't cry. I whispered to the silence. You will regret this. I will make sure you regret it. I began to craft a timeline. I knew their getaway abroad was scheduled to start 3 days after the wedding. I also knew Mark had set up an offshore account, something I hadn't paid much attention to, but one I could access through old passwords saved on our shared laptop. That night I sat down with a notebook and mapped everything out. Step 1. Gather evidence that couldn't be denied. Step 2. Identify the people who would be affected and how. Step 3. Make sure the exposure would be absolute, complete, and irreversible. It was one thing to expose them privately. It was another to ensure that every piece of their constructed world collapsed. I made a rule. I wouldn't tell my friends. I wouldn't cry to my sister or call my therapist. This was mine. No one could talk me out of it. No one could tell me to move on. The betrayal was mine to avenge. That didn't mean I had no allies, just that I wouldn't share the full picture. I confided in Samantha, my coworker, but only half-truths. I told her I felt abandoned by my family, that my husband was distant. She offered support, sympathy, even a listening ear. But I never revealed the affair. The darkness I carried had to stay mine. The moment of clarity. It hit me when I was watching the news one evening. There was a story about how people's secrets can destroy them, not because they're scandalous, but because they're exposed to the wrong eyes at the wrong time. I paused the TV and looked at myself in the reflection of the dark screen. I asked aloud, what if I don't just expose them? What if I destroy the life they thought they had? Felt satisfying and terrifying, but the thrill made me stronger. I started by copying every message between Mark and Vanessa onto a secure folder. I backed it up in 3 places: an external drive, a cloud account under a fake name, and printed copies hidden inside a locked box. Then I began collecting more. I reviewed his bank statements, noticed withdrawals to luxury hotels, and payments to airlines booked under Vanessa's name. I discreetly retrieved video clips he had mistakenly uploaded, using screen recording tools at night when he slept. I wasn't reckless. I wanted undeniable proof, nothing that could be dismissed as hearsay or misunderstanding. While I collected evidence, I began writing out how I would expose them. I thought about confronting them publicly, but that would only lead to apologies, manipulations, and empty tears. I wanted the world to see. I listed, emailing the entire family network, sending anonymous packets to news websites and gossip blogs, printing evidence to send to Ethan's friends, his co-workers, and even Vanessa's parents, creating a fake profile and leaking clips on social media. Every option seemed ruthless, but also necessary. I considered staging it during Ethan's wedding weekend. What better time to watch their perfect family image implode? There were moments when I questioned myself. Was I becoming someone I never wanted to be? Could revenge truly make me feel better, or would it hollow me out? I remembered the early days of my marriage, how we had laughed over burnt dinners, how we had weathered storms together. Was all of that erased? Part of me longed for reconciliation. But then I imagined Mark in Vanessa's arms. That image hardened the doubt. I whispered to myself, they deserve this. I drafted an anonymous letter to Ethan. You deserve to know who your father really is. You deserve to see the truth before it's too late. I didn't send it, not yet, but it felt like a dagger in my pocket, ready for the right moment. Sleep eluded me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling as the sounds of the neighborhood settled into silence. I thought of Ethan's face at the altar, of the guests applauding, of my absence being disguised as distance or awkwardness. I realized something terrifying. I would be a ghost at my own family's greatest celebration. That night I cried. But the tears didn't soften my resolve. Instead I whispered, tomorrow I will make them see what it feels like to be left out, abandoned, humiliated. The morning of the wedding, I sat in front of the mirror. Who are you? Asked. 1,000 answers echoed back. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a betrayed woman. I am justice. The last one lingered, and I smiled. By noon I had every piece in place. 1. The evidence folder, ready to be sent to news outlets, blogs, and social media. 2. The anonymous emails, drafted and timed to send during the reception when chaos would peak. 3. The hidden copy, locked safely away in case I lost control, with instructions for another family member to reveal everything if I disappeared. 4. The personal attack, a letter to Ethan to be sent after the fallout, ensuring he never could say he wasn't warned. I breathed deeply and whispered one last time. Let the storm begin. The day of my son's wedding came, and I woke up before sunrise. My heart raced, not out of excitement but out of something darker. I dressed carefully, not glamorous but ordinary, almost invisible. I didn't want them to notice me. I wanted them to feel safe, comfortable, secure. Because when you least expect it, that's when everything shatters. I arrived at the venue hours before anyone else. The decorations, the flowers, the chairs all laid out in neat rows. It was beautiful, perfectly orchestrated. But beneath it all, I felt like a storm waiting to break. I stayed in the background. No one really looked at me twice. I greeted a few distant relatives with polite smiles. No one suspected that I carried in my purse the kind of destruction that could ruin reputations, tear apart relationships, and turn a celebration into a scandal. As the afternoon approached, guests began arriving. I saw Ethan, my sweet boy, looking dashing in his tuxedo. He smiled when he saw me from across the room. My chest twisted with love and grief, but I forced my lips to curl into a warm smile. Mark arrived with Vanessa, his arm confidently draped around her waist. He laughed with guests, shaking hands, his eyes sparkling like nothing could touch him. Vanessa, dressed in a sleek gown, wore an air of smug satisfaction. They thought they had it all. And I stood there, unseen, planning their downfall. The ceremony began, and I remained in the shadows, watching. The vows were heartfelt, tears glistened in eyes, and smiles stretched across the crowd. My son and his bride exchanged rings, sealed promises, and embraced each other. Just as the officiant declared them husband and wife, I slipped away to a quiet corner, pulled out my phone and pressed send. A blast of emails, subject lines screaming, "Your family's dark secret exposed. Scandal at the wedding everyone ignored. See what your trusted father has been hiding." Within minutes, the first wave began. It started with a subtle ripple. A guest's phone buzzed. Another glanced around confused. A server paused mid-step, eyes darting. A few guests walked away to check their devices. Whispers grew. "What is that? Check your messages. Oh my God, no way. Is it really him?" The more people checked, the faster the whispers spread. I sat quietly, my hands folded, a faint smile playing on my lips. Just as the ceremony wrapped up and people began moving toward the reception, I triggered the next phase. The evidence folder, painstakingly collected over weeks, was now flying across the internet. Blogs, gossip columns, local news sites, and even national outlets started picking it up. A headline flashed. "Father of the groom caught in affair amid wedding festivities." Screens at the hotel bar displayed the story. Guests froze, holding drinks mid-air. Mark's smile faltered. Vanessa's face drained of color. Videos leaked. Snippets of Mark and Vanessa laughing intimately at restaurants. Hotel check-ins with falsified names. Screenshots of steamy messages. Comments poured in. Some guests covered their faces. Others openly stared. Phones everywhere buzzed relentlessly. I waited until dinner service began. A waiter, unaware of what he carried, placed sealed envelopes at each table under place cards. When guests opened them, shock spread like wildfire. Inside, printed screenshots, hotel receipts, message logs, evidence so damning that denial was impossible. People began confronting each other. Some whispered apologies. Others shook their heads in disgust. I sat at the back of the room, watching it unravel. Mark's composure cracked as guests gathered around him, phones thrust into his face. "What is this? Is this true? How could you, during your son's wedding?" He stumbled, tried to explain, but his voice trembled. Vanessa's grip on his arm loosened as guests recoiled. I could see the color draining from his cheeks. Vanessa, always so composed and confident, suddenly became the subject of whispers and pointed fingers. Some women glared at her as if she were a plague. A few men laughed bitterly behind their hands. Her phone rang constantly. Messages flooded in. Accusations, curses, warnings. She sat at the edge of the room, staring blankly, unable to respond. My son, bless his heart, was caught in the middle. He stood frozen, staring at his father's collapse, his new wife's disbelief, and the storm that surrounded him. I watched his face crumble, the kind of heartbreak that doesn't need words. He looked around helplessly, wanting to fix things, but paralyzed by betrayal. For a moment, I wanted to run to him, hold his hand, but I didn't. This was his moment of reckoning. By the time the first round of speeches was supposed to start, the hall was silent except for murmurs and stunned faces. Guests who had been laughing and celebrating barely hours ago now stood awkwardly, unsure where to sit or what to say. Some left quietly. Others huddled in corners, phones pressed to ears. Few wept openly. And through it all I sat composed, but inside a fire roared. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't dancing. I was simply present, watching karma unfold before my eyes. Before I left the venue that evening, I sent one more message. To Ethan. You deserved the truth. Forgive me or hate me, it's your choice. But know that no one deserves betrayal wrapped in celebration. I didn't sign it. I walked out quietly, never once looking back. That night, news coverage continued. Mark's reputation shattered. Vanessa's social circles shrank. Ethan faced questions but also sympathy. And I, though I sat alone in my small apartment, felt strangely at peace. The storm had come, and it had done its work. But as I sat by the window, staring at the city lights, I wondered if this was the end, or the beginning of something else entirely. The days after the wedding felt like a storm that wouldn't stop. I stayed in my small apartment, keeping the curtains drawn, and listening to the news without turning it on. The world outside kept moving, but for me, everything seemed suspended in silence. At first, I thought I would feel satisfaction, some twisted sense of justice, but that's not what happened. Felt hollow. Mark's downfall was complete. Within days, his business partners cut ties with him. Clients withdrew contracts. Social media attacks grew so harsh that his accounts went dark. He stopped answering calls, and neighbors whispered about him in hallways. Vanessa barely left her home. She stopped attending gatherings, stopped posting pictures, stopped speaking to friends who had once admired her. The once confident, polished woman was now a ghost of herself. My son Ethan, that broke me the most. He sat in silence for days. His wedding photos, once filled with smiles, became a painful reminder of what was lost. He questioned everything, whether he had been blind, whether love could survive betrayal, whether family even mattered anymore. He avoided me at first. I could feel his pain from afar. A week later, my doorbell rang. It was Ethan. He didn't say much at first. He stood there, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders slumped. I invited him in, made him tea, and we sat in silence for a while. Finally he whispered, "Why, Mom? Why like this? Why ruin everything?" I looked at him and swallowed the lump in my throat. "I wanted you to see the truth," I said quietly. "You deserved it." He shook his head. "You wanted to protect me, but this broke me more." Tears streamed down his cheeks, and my heart ached like I'd been stabbed. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. The planning, the sending of emails, the moment guests stared in shock, the way Mark crumbled, the silence around Vanessa, my son's trembling hands. I asked myself, was this justice or cruelty? I told myself I was teaching him a lesson, that betrayal should never be hidden. But what did it teach? That the pain we cause spreads like wildfire, burning the innocent along with the guilty. I had always thought revenge would bring closure, but instead it left scars. The next morning I wrote a letter to Ethan. "My dear son, I did what I thought was right, but I see now that revenge never brings peace. I wanted to shield you from lies, but I only gave you pain. I hope you find strength to rebuild. Not from hatred, but from love, forgiveness, and self-respect. I'm here for you always. Mom." I left it on his doorstep. That afternoon he came by again. He didn't hug me right away. Instead, he sat down, read the letter slowly, and then quietly placed his hand over mine. "We'll find a way," he said. From this, I learned something deeper than I ever expected. Revenge feels satisfying in the moment, like it balances the scales. But true strength lies not in retaliation. It lies in the courage to face the wound without lashing out. Justice can be pursued, but compassion is what heals. I had wanted to tear their world apart to teach a lesson. Instead, I realized that rebuilding, forgiving, and choosing love takes far greater strength. Today, I still think about that wedding. I think about the guests, the shock, the chaos. I think about how easily trust can be broken, and how much harder it is to repair. But I also think about my son's eyes, filled with sorrow yet still reaching out to me. That gave me hope. We can't control how others behave, but we can choose how we respond. Revenge may silence the moment, but love rebuilds the future. And that's the story I wanted to share.